June 8, 1944, at RAF Rattlesden, Technical Sergeant Robert E. Orlowski, a 26-year-old aircraft mechanic with 0 combat missions, checked the B-17G Flying Fortress assigned to him. He watched fuel drip from a newly replaced SEAL, knowing that in 12 hours, this bomber would carry 10 men into the perilous skies over France. The 447th Bomb Group was hemorrhaging aircraft, having lost 21 B-17s in April, a loss rate exceeded only by the legendary Bloody Hundredth. 11 crew chiefs had already seen their fortresses destroyed, most of which never returned. Orlowski, known as Ori, tightened the seal and moved on. The Wright No. 3 engine, an R-1800 Cyclone, had logged 42 hours since its last oil change. He pulled the dipstick, clean, no metal fragments, yet he knew engines could fail instantly, hydraulic systems rupture mid-flight. At Rattlesden, half the B-17s were typically grounded with mechanical issues. This particular aircraft, serial number 4337756, was a nameless replacement, arriving just 2 days prior to join a bomb group burning through planes faster than Boeing could build them. Ori's job was simple: keep this airplane flying. Every inspection, every repair, every check was a promise to the 10 men whose lives depended on his work. He climbed onto the wing to inspect the No. 2 engine's ignition harness, tracing every wire for fraying or corrosion. A single failed wire could cause an engine fire, forcing an abort. Since its first mission on Christmas Eve 1943, the 447th had lost dozens of aircraft, some to flak and fighters, but many more turned back due to mechanical failures like fuel leaks, engine problems, or hydraulic malfunctions. An aborted bomber was a bomber that failed to drop its bombs. Ori had 18 months of technical training in engine mechanics, hydraulics, and electrical systems before ever touching a combat aircraft. Now he was solely responsible for every system on this fortress: the 4 engines, fuel, hydraulics, electrical, and oxygen. Every component had to function flawlessly, every time, or men died. The first crew assigned to the bomber included August Altus, a navigator transferred from the 15th Air Force in Italy. After their initial mission over Berlin, Altus called flying out of England a milk run. The crew immediately named the aircraft Milk Wagon. They painted a cartoon cow on the nose, and for every successful mission, they added a white milk bottle on a black background to the fuselage. Ori thought the cow and milk bottles were ridiculous, but the name stuck, and this silly cartoon plane became his responsibility too. He finished his inspection, checking the landing gear, tire pressure, brake lines, and control surfaces. Everything was smooth, but he knew the statistics. B-17s averaged 30 accidents per 100,000 flight hours. Half of the 8th Air Force's fortresses were out of commission at any given time. Standing back, Ori looked at the cow-painted bomber. That morning, he made a decision that would define his war. He would do more than the other crew chiefs. He decided to inspect every system before every mission, not just the required checks. He would replace parts before they failed, catching problems before they became emergencies. He vowed to turn the cow-painted fortress into the most reliable bomber in the 8th Air Force. On July 19, 1944, Milk Wagon was scheduled for a mission to a synthetic oil plant in Germany. That morning, 3 other B-17s aborted on the ground, and 2 more turned back over the channel due to engine or hydraulic failure. Ori watched them return, knowing the crew chiefs were skilled men whose fortresses had failed. Milk Wagon took off at 0730 hours, climbed into formation with 35 other B-17s from the 447th, and returned 8 hours later without damage, mechanical problems, system failures, or an abort. 1 mission, 1 milk bottle. Ori had the aircraft back in 20 hours, performing a complete post-flight inspection, checking cylinders, hydraulic lines, and electrical connections. He found nothing wrong, but perfect meant nothing if it couldn't be repeated. Over the next 3 weeks, Milk Wagon flew 7 more missions to targets like Berlin, Mersburg, and Munich. Each flight lasted between 6 and 9 hours, subjecting the bomber to flak, fighters, and the brutal stress of combat formation flying. Each time, the Fortress returned without mechanical failure. 8 missions, 8 milk bottles, 0 aborts. Other B-17s at Rattlesden were not so lucky, with failures like engine trouble, hydraulic problems, and electrical malfunctions forcing turnbacks. Orry studied every abort, talking to the other crew chiefs to learn what failed and why. Fuel pumps, oil coolers, ignition systems, and more. He applied those lessons to Milk Wagon, beginning to replace parts before they reached their service limits. He changed oil filters every 25 hours instead of 50 hours, spark plugs every 100 hours instead of 200 hours, and hydraulic seals at the first sign of seepage. He kept meticulous maintenance logs, tracking every component's history. While other crew chiefs followed the technical manuals, Orry went further, inspecting and testing systems not scheduled for checks, spending hours tracing wiring and hunting for problems that hadn't yet manifested. By September, Milk Wagon had flown 20 missions, 20 milk bottles, and 20 successful missions without a single mechanical abort, the longest streak in the 708th Bomb Squadron. The streak continued through the autumn. Even though the bomber absorbed battle damage, including flak holes and shrapnel, the mechanical systems, engines, hydraulics, and electrical, never failed. Orry and his ground crew repaired the battle damage between flights, patching holes and replacing panels. October brought worse weather, with missions through ice and clouds and temperatures dropping to 40 degrees below zero, which stressed every component. Other B-17s began aborting due to cold weather failures, but Milk Wagon kept flying. By November, the Fortress had completed 50 missions, 50 milk bottles, marking the longest uninterrupted mission streak in the 447th Bomb Group and possibly the entire 8th Air Force. Orry was summoned to the group engineering officer, expecting a reprimand for excessive maintenance and unauthorized part replacement. Instead, the officer asked how he was achieving the feat. Orry explained his process: pre-mission inspections beyond the technical manual requirements, preventative part replacement, detailed maintenance logs, and constant monitoring. The engineering officer listened, did not criticize, and told Orry to continue. Milk Wagon was now the most reliable bomber at Rattlesden, always ready to fly when others were grounded. By December 1944, Milk Wagon had flown 70 missions, approaching the highest mission count of any B-17 in the European theater. The Battle of the Bulge began on December 16th, requiring maximum effort missions against German supply lines. On Christmas Eve, December 24th, with temperatures below freezing and ice on the wings, Orry performed his final pre-mission inspection. Everything seemed normal, but heavy clouds and icing conditions were forecast over Germany. Milk Wagon took off at 08 hours for a 9-hour strike against rail yards near Cologne. It returned at 1700 hours with no mechanical failures, completing mission 71.
The Battle of the Bulge continued with terrible weather, making routine maintenance nearly impossible. Orry adapted, preheating the engines, draining and replacing hydraulic fluid more often, and sealing electrical connections against moisture and ice. He refused to let weather cause an abort. Between December 24th and January 1st, Milk Wagon flew 6 successful missions in 8 days, while other B-17s aborted regularly with cold weather problems. By January 1945, the Fortress had completed 80 missions, and other crew chiefs had stopped questioning Orley's methods. Some adopted his techniques, but none could match his obsession or replicate his success. The war entered its final phase, and the mission tempo increased. Orry maintained his standards, completing every thorough inspection and system check, refusing to compromise even as they neared the record. By February, Milk Wagon had flown 100 missions, with 100 milk bottles covering both sides of the fuselage. The bomber was famous as the most reliable B-17 in England, the one that never turned back. Newspaper correspondents interviewed the flight crews, who credited the airplane, its reliability, and luck, but none mentioned Orlowski by name. He preferred it that way, seeing himself as simply maintaining an aircraft and doing his job. On March 15, 1945, Orry received orders to an awards ceremony. He was awarded the Bronze Star Medal for exceptionally meritorious service for maintaining B-17G serial number 4333756 through over 100 combat missions without a single mechanical abort. After the 10-minute ceremony, he returned to the flight line. Milk Wagon was scheduled to fly the next morning. By April, the Fortress had flown 120 missions. On April 19th, Milk Wagon flew mission 128. 2 days later, on April 21st, he performed the pre-flight inspection for mission 129. The mission was routine, and by noon, the bomber was back at Rattlesden. Mission 129 complete. No mechanical failures, no aborts. Never. That afternoon, the 8th Air Force announced a decrease in mission tempo. April 21, 1945, had been Milk Wagon's last combat flight. Germany surrendered on May 7th. Orry continued his maintenance routine, but no new missions came. The ground crews began preparing aircraft for the flight back to America. Milk Wagon would fly home, but Orry, assigned to the ground echelon, would sail on a transport ship. His war was over. On July 9, 1945, Orry watched Milk Wagon take off from Rattlesden for the last time, headed for Bradley Field, Connecticut. He had maintained the aircraft for 13 months, spending thousands of hours ensuring it would not fail. It never had. 129 missions, 0 mechanical aborts, a record that might never be matched. Milk Wagon arrived in the United States, but with the war over, the bomber was assigned for disposal. On November 21, 1945, it was sold and flown to Kingman, Arizona, a desert storage facility where surplus aircraft were scrapped. In December 1945, the most reliable bomber in the 8th Air Force was cut apart and melted down. Its aluminum recycled. No museum preserved it. The Fortress simply disappeared. But the record remained, 129 consecutive missions without a single mechanical abort. This was achieved by a ground crew led by Technical Sergeant Robert E. Orlowski, a mechanic who refused to accept that aircraft failed and believed that obsessive maintenance could overcome the chaos of war. The statistics confirm his success. Between June 1944 and April 1945, the 447th Bomb Group flew over 8,000 sorties, with about 15% failing to reach their targets, mostly due to mechanical failures. Milk Wagon flew 129 missions, 0 aborts, 0 mechanical failures, 0 turnbacks. The probability was astronomical. Orry's achievement was not just maintenance, it was his refusal to accept failure as inevitable. He replaced components before they failed, not at their rated service life, such as changing spark plugs at 150 hours instead of 200. This approach required more parts and labor, but it prevented failures in flight. Other crew chiefs considered this wasteful, following the manuals and fixing problems as they appeared. Orlowski proved his method worked. He also kept meticulous logs of every detail, from engine oil analysis to component serial numbers, which allowed him to identify failure patterns, like fuel pumps on the number 3 engine failing more frequently. He then adopted preventative measures for those patterns, further reducing the chance of failure. Orry's ground crew, including mechanics, specialists, and armorers, worked alongside him with the same dedication, often in terrible conditions, never letting Milk Wagon fail. The flight crews also contributed, treating the aircraft with respect, monitoring systems, and reporting problems immediately, understanding their survival depended on the machine's reliability. However, the record ultimately belonged to Orry. He set the standard, made the decisions on part replacement, and spent the extra hours on inspections. No other B-17 in the European theater matched his achievement. Other famous bombers like Memphis Belle, 25 missions, and Hell's Angels, 48 missions in the Pacific, completed far fewer missions before rotating home. And other fortresses that exceeded 100 total missions still aborted regularly. Milk Wagon never aborted. The bomber's reliability meant it was frequently assigned to lead positions in formations, which carried the most trusted bombers and carried the best navigators and bombardiers. A lead aircraft aborting could compromise the entire mission, but Milk Wagon never failed in this role. Its high availability, exceeding 90% compared to the 50 to 60% average, meant it flew more missions than other grounded B-17s. The 447th Engineering Staff studied his methods, finding that Milk Wagon consumed more parts and labor, but the return on investment was clear: an aircraft that never failed and contributed more to the war effort than any other B-17 in the group. Orry returned to civilian life after the war, working as a mechanic in Pennsylvania and rarely speaking of his wartime service. He did not consider himself a hero, having not flown combat missions, but his contribution was significant. Every mission Milk Wagon completed was a strike against Germany, helping shorten the conflict. The maintenance of a B-17 was immensely complex, with over 400,000 parts, 4 engines with 72 total cylinders, 24 fuel tanks, and a high-pressure hydraulic system. Orry mastered every system, recognizing warning signs by sound, smell, and touch. His legacy is an unbreakable record, a testament to what skilled, obsessive, preventative maintenance can achieve, proving that mechanical reliability was not a matter of luck. Robert E. Orlowski died in 2004 at age 86. His son remembered him as humble and unassuming, a man who took pride in doing his job right without seeking recognition. His work saved lives, ensuring that for 129 consecutive missions, 10 airmen flew in an aircraft they could trust, allowing them to focus on fighting the war. The cow-painted B-17 is gone, but the record of 129 consecutive missions without a mechanical abort remains unmatched.